Let's drop that. Good morning. This morning's lesson is entitled Brother Killers, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute. There are actually 3 stories in Genesis that I want to look at regarding this subject. And part of this lesson was based on a request that I got. As I will remind you all and continue to remind you, I do take sermon requests. I always reserve the right to change or reject any requests that you may give me, but I will listen to them and I will not shoot them down simply for asking. So if you've got some lesson that you want to hear or some question that you want answered, feel free to talk to me about it. We can always work that in somewhere. But this morning I want to look at 3 stories in Genesis about brother killers, and I want to make an application to us as well. And the first one is, of course, in Genesis chapter 4. And begin in Genesis chapter 4, and I want to begin reading in verse 1. The man had relations with his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. And she said, I have gotten a man-child with the help of the Lord. Again, she gave birth to his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of flocks, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. So it came about in the course of time that Cain brought an offering to the Lord of the fruit of the ground. Abel, on his part, also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering. But for Cain and for his offering he had no regard. So Cain became very angry, and his countenance fell. The Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must master it. Cain told Abel his brother, and it came about when they were in the field, Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. The Lord said to Cain, Where is Abel your brother? And he said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? He said, What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. Now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you cultivate the ground, it will no longer yield its strength to you. You will be a vagrant and a wanderer on the earth. Cain said to the Lord, My punishment is too great to bear. Behold, you have driven me this day from the face of the ground, and from your face I will be hidden, and I will be a vagrant and a wanderer on the earth. And whoever finds me will kill me. So the Lord said to him, Therefore whoever kills Cain, vengeance will be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord appointed a sign for Cain, so that no one finding him would slay him. You read the way this story unfolds. Cain and Abel are brothers with different occupations. One's a shepherd, one's a farmer. Cain and Abel both offer sacrifices to the Lord, and exactly where they got the instruction to do this, we don't know. But we notice the wording of the text is rather clear when it says that Abel's sacrifice was better. Abel offered firstlings of his flock, whereas Cain offered some of the fruit of the ground. And this statement is interpreted for us in Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 4 when the Hebrew author says that by faith Abel offered a better sacrifice than Cain. Well, Cain doesn't like this very much. He gets angry. He gets jealous of his brother because his brother offered a better sacrifice. And because the Lord likes Abel better than Cain, apparently. And so Cain's countenance falls, which is a way of saying he wasn't very happy. And God comes to him and he says, Well, why has your countenance fallen? Which is a way of saying, why the long face? And then he emphasizes something to Cain. He says that sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. It's inevitable that between brothers, between siblings, conflicts will arise. But the question is not whether conflicts will arise, but what you will do about them when they arise. And such is the case here with Cain and Abel. You have a choice to make here, Cain. And the choice you have is whether or not you will give in to sin's desire for you. Well, the very next thing that happens, of course, is Cain tells Abel his brother, and the textual variant reads what Cain actually told his brother, which is, let us go out into the field. And they go out into the field, and Cain murders Abel. Now, this strikes me as rather interesting that there aren't very many people on the face of the earth yet It's just Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, and I don't know if they have other children. The text does not say at this point. Later on, we learn that Adam and Eve did have other sons and daughters. But Cain's problem isn't that he played too many violent video games or that there weren't good enough gun control laws in his area. Cain's problem was that the problem that each and every one of us has. The problem that Adam and Eve had. The problem now that the whole world deals with. The problem of sin. And after Cain has committed this sin, after he has committed the first murder, God comes to him and he wants to know, where's Abel your brother? And just like in the Garden of Eden, whenever Adam and Eve are confronted by God and God says, well, who told you that we were naked? Well, where are you? God's not asking these questions because He doesn't know the answer to these questions. He's asking these questions to give them a chance to come clean with their sin and with their error. But just like Adam and Eve before them, Cain puts a spin on the truth. Adam and Eve were pointing fingers at each other and blaming rather than taking personal responsibility. Cain likewise neglects personal responsibility. He says, I do not know where Abel is. Well, that's just a lie. Then he goes on and says, well, am I my brother's keeper? Well, you think about that. Well, that statement has a point to it. You might say, well, Cain can't be expected to follow Abel around all day and know his exact geographical coordinates at every turn of events. So, no, he's not really his brother's keeper in that sense. But of course his answer is deceitful because he does know where Abel is, and because God exposes the deceitfulness of his answer in this instance. Just as Satan wraps up a lie in the truth, Cain does the same thing here. Like a true child of Satan, like a true son of the devil, he wraps up his lie in his little legitimate point. Cain is the seed of Satan that God spoke about in Genesis 3. God exposes his deceitfulness. He says, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. We talked about this a little in Bible class. Whenever innocent blood is shed, it cries out for vengeance. In Genesis chapter 9, it says that whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood must be shed. In the law of Moses throughout, we see these constant thing going on where people who shed innocent blood, they defile the land that they're in. So much so that if a city in Israel, if they found a body in the field and they didn't know who killed them, well, the closest city had to offer some kind of sacrifice to atone for it. Otherwise, the ground itself would be defiled. Even though they don't know who did it, they still got to atone for the blood defiling the ground. And in this case, Abel's blood cries out for vengeance. God lays a curse on Cain, but Abel is not avenged at this point. Cain is instead reduced to wandering as a nomad. But of course, Cain himself manages to escape death. And God appoints a sign on Cain that vengeance will be taken on him. And we see that Cain's descendants follow in a similar pattern. When Lamech said to his wives that I have killed a man for wounding me and a boy for striking me. And if Cain is avenged sevenfold, and Lamech 77-fold. Cain is the seed of Satan. He is the prototype brother killer. A second example of this is in Genesis chapter 26. Lay the background, the groundwork for this. We have the story of Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau were brothers, like Cain and Abel were brothers. Like Cain and Abel, they had two different occupations. Esau was a man who hunted out in the fields, and Jacob was a tent dweller. Some people would call him a mama's boy, I don't know. Genesis 27, I must correct what I said. It's not chapter 26, it's chapter 27. Jacob and Esau were twin brothers as well. They were born on the same day, but Esau was technically born first, which means that he gets the birthright. And for ancient people, the practice of giving a birthright meant that you got a double share of the inheritance, which Esau gets basically 2/3 of his father's estate, and Jacob only gets 1/3. Imagine, cheated out of that by just 5 minutes. That can't be good. But Jacob manages to con Esau out of his birthright for a single bowl of stew in Genesis 25, and the Hebrew author calls him immoral and godless for that in Hebrews chapter 12. But I want to look now at this instance where Jacob deceives Isaac into giving him a prophetic blessing that was meant for Esau. In Genesis 27, it came about when Isaac was old and his eyes were too dim to see, he called his older son Esau and said to him, "My son." He said to him, "Here I am." Isaac said, "Behold, now I am old, and I do not know the day of my death. Now then, please take your quiver, your gear, your quiver, your bow, go out into the field and hunt game for me. Prepare a savory dish for me, such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, so that my soul may bless you before I die." Rebekah was listening while Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went into the field to hunt for a game to bring home, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Behold, I heard your father speak to your brother Esau, saying, 'Bring me some game, and prepare a savory dish for me, that I may eat and bless you in the presence of the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, listen to me as I command you. Go now to the flock, and bring me 2 choice young goats from there, that I may prepare them as a savory dish for your father, such as he loves. You shall bring it to your father, that he may eat, so that he may bless you before his death.' Jacob answered his mother Rebekah, 'Behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man, and perhaps my father will feel me, and then I will be as a deceiver in his sight, and I will bring upon myself a curse and not a blessing.' But his mother said to him, 'Your curse be on me, my son, only obey my voice, and go get them for me.' So he went and got them and brought them to his mother. His mother made savory food such as his father loved. Rebekah took the best garments of Esau, her elder son, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son. And she put the skins of the smooth part of the young goats on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. She also gave the savory food and the bread which she had made to her son Jacob. Then he came to his father and said, 'My father.' And he said, 'Here I am. Who are you, my son?' And Jacob said to his father, 'I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Get up, please, sit and eat of my game, that you may bless me.' Well, Isaac said to his son, 'How is it that you brought it so quickly, my son?' He said, 'Because the Lord your God caused it to happen to me.' Isaac said to Jacob, 'Please come close, that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not.' So Jacob came close to Isaac his father, and he felt him, and said, 'The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau.' He did not recognize him, because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands, so he blessed him. And he said, 'Are you really my son Esau?' He said, 'I am.' Well, that would convince just about anybody, wouldn't it? He said, 'Bring it to me, I will eat of my son's game, that I may bless you.' He brought it to him, he ate, he also brought him wine, he drank. His father Isaac said to him, 'Please come close and kiss me, my son.' So he came close and kissed him. And when he smelled the smell of his garments, he blessed him and said, 'See, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. Now may God give you of the dew of the heaven, and of the fatness of the earth, and of the fatness and the abundance of grain and new wine. May peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be master of your brothers. And may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be those who bless you.'" He fools his father Isaac. And just say this at this juncture. Jacob gets a reputation as Jacob the deceiver. But I would note that if Jacob was at this point in the habit of deceiving people, his father probably would not have been as accepting of his statements as he is on this occasion. Now Jacob does, well, it just happens that the stories we have recorded about Jacob, he always happens to be deceiving somebody, at least up to this point. But he gets his just deserts in this eventually. Well, Esau comes in, he finds out about it. His father gives him a blessing that's not really a blessing at all. "Behold, away from the fertility of the earth shall be your dwelling, and away from the dew of the heaven from above. By your sword you shall live, and your brother you shall serve, but it shall come about when you become restless that you break his yoke from your neck." But the point I want to make here is verse 41. Esau bore a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are near, and then I will kill my brother Jacob." Esau's plan is to kill Jacob. Now, everybody in this story has a moral blind spot. We have a father, Isaac, who is blind and who makes decisions based solely on his palate, contrasted with Abraham, who sees in spite of his old age in Genesis 22. We have a masterminding mother who goads her son to this deceptive behavior in the first place, and she gets her just deserts because this is the last time she ever sees Jacob. Her death account is not even recorded in Genesis. We just find out after the fact that she has died. We have a deceptive son who lies to his father, who misleads the blind, something for which Deuteronomy 27 verse 18 says, "Cursed is the man who misleads the blind." But Esau is the one who turns out to be like Cain. Esau is the one who turns out to be the seed of Satan, from whom the promise will not come. Esau is the one who conspires to kill his brother. Now he doesn't succeed. He's not like Cain in that respect. Jacob gets away, he flees to the land of Aram, and it's a long time before they see each other again, another 20 years. In Genesis 33, Esau does repent of that. Nevertheless, Esau is not a man who gets a good epitaph in the Bible. In Malachi chapter 1, God says that Jacob I have loved and Esau I have hated. In Hebrews chapter 12, the Hebrew author uses Esau as an example of what not to be as a person. He says in verse 15 through 17, "See to it that no one comes short of the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble, and by it many be defiled, that there be no immoral or godless person like Esau, who sold his own birthright for a single meal. For you know that even afterwards, when he desired to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought for it with tears." That's not an epitaph I'd like to have written about me. Moral and godless, that's who Esau was. He is another brother killer after the model of Cain. A third story, also in Genesis, that relates to this principle, and this is more where the request stemmed from, is in Genesis chapter 37. Jacob had 12 sons, and he lived in the land where his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. And beginning in verse 2 of Genesis 37, these are the records of the generations of Jacob. Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a varicolored tunic, or you could translate that a long-sleeved tunic, I think probably more correctly, although it doesn't make as interesting for pictures, I think. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Please, listen to this dream which I've had. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field. And behold, my sheaves rose up and stood erect. And behold, your sheaves gathered round them and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you actually going to reign over us? Are you really going to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. He had still another dream. And he related it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I had still another dream. And behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." He related it to his father and to his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you've had? Shall I and your mother and your brothers actually come to bow ourselves down before you to the ground?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his fathers kept the saying in mind. Now, it's important to consider all this because every single time up to this point in the book of Genesis that somebody has had a dream, it has always been from God. Genesis is the book of the Bible that mentions dreams, these prophetic dreams, more than any other book in the Old Testament. And maybe Daniel could give it a run for the money, I don't know. But Genesis is definitely the one that's the most predominant in this idea. But Joseph's brothers don't like him very much for this. They're jealous of him. They're jealous of his father's favoritism. They're jealous. They're mad because Joseph keeps tattling on them. I don't think tattling is as bad of a thing as some people in our society make it out to be. But that's another lesson in another sermon. His father gives him a varicolored tunic. I think long-sleeved tunic is probably a better translation. And what this means essentially is that he wouldn't have had to work. He gets to live in the tents and be kind of the favorite royal son, if you will. And Joseph's having dreams about his whole family bowing to them. This doesn't sit well with these brothers. So Joseph's brothers conspire to kill him. Jacob sends him after his brothers to check on them while they're pasturing the flocks. In verse 18, they saw him from a distance. Before he came close to them, they plotted against him to put him to death. Here we have the brother killers again. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Now then come, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits, and we will say, 'A wild beast devoured him.' Then let's see what will become of his dreams." Irony of ironies, of course, the fact that they do this winds up resulting in the fulfillment of these dreams eventually, because they all eventually bow down to him unwittingly in Genesis chapter 42 and verse 6. And then several times after that. But Reuben heard this and rescued him out of their hands and said, "Let us not take his life." Reuben further said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit that's in the wilderness, but do not lay hands on him." that he might rescue him out of their hands to restore him to their father. Now, is Reuben the goody two-shoes of the brother? Is he the one that's really interested in saving Joseph's life here? I think Reuben has a personal agenda, motivation in all of this. Reuben is in his father's bad graces. He's been sleeping with his concubine Bilhah in Genesis chapter 35 and verse 22. And that's the act that gets him disinherited, basically. He loses his lion's share as the firstborn son. In Genesis 49 in verses 3 and 4, Jacob's last words to Reuben are that, Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, preeminent in dignity, preeminent in power, uncontrolled as water. You shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. Reuben's in hot water with his father right now, and Reuben's trying to get out of that. He's trying to get into his father's good graces. And what better way to do that than to restore his favorite son to him? Reuben does. This isn't the last time he tries this either. Later on in the text, whenever it's time to send somebody to Egypt, Reuben tries to use his two sons as insurance and say, well, if they kill Benjamin, you can kill my two sons. Yeah, that's a real self-sacrificial move there. No. Reuben tries to save Joseph, but he's selfishly motivated. But it came about when Joseph reached his brothers, they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the long-sleeved tunic that was on him. They took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty, without any water in it. And they sat down to eat a meal, and as they raised their eyes and looked, behold, a caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilead with their camels bearing aromatic gum and balm and myrrh on their way to bring them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it for us to kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he's our brother, our own flesh. His brothers listened to him. Then some Midianite traders passed by. They pulled him up and lifted Joseph up out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Thus they brought Joseph into Egypt. Now, again, this is not a mercy move. Judah's just saying, hey, let's sell him so we don't have to cover it up ourselves. As far as everybody is concerned, Joseph is dead at this point. Kidnapping and selling somebody into slavery was considered a capital crime in the law of Moses. In Exodus 21 and verse 16, in Deuteronomy 24 and verse 7. It was one and the same as murder because you were destroying that person's life. Everybody believes that Joseph is dead. Jacob believes it. The brothers believe it. And, several times when they're in Egypt and they're conversing with the Egyptians, they mention their brother Joseph, that he is dead. He is no more. Reuben says, now comes the reckoning for his blood. They believe he's gone. And they are indirectly responsible for getting rid of him. They just don't want to, actually have to wash their hands of his blood. But for all practical purposes, they are brother killers here. Then they deceive Jacob. Jacob gets his just deserts here. Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. He tore his garments. He returned to his brothers and said, the boy is not here. As for me, where am I to go? So they took Joseph's tunic and slaughtered a male goat and dipped the tunic in blood. And they sent the long-sleeved tunic and brought it to their father and said, we found this. Please examine it to see whether it is your son's tunic or not. He examined it and said, it is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. So Jacob tore his clothes and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son for many days. And all his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted and said, surely I will go down to Sheol in mourning for my son. So his father wept for him. Just as Jacob used clothing to deceive Isaac, now Jacob's sons use clothing to deceive him. It is a perfect example of equal retribution. Why do I bring all this up? Why do I talk about brother killers? Well, we should ourselves ask the simple question of, are we a brother killer or not? And you might be sitting here thinking, well, I've never killed anybody. I've never done any of these horrible things that are described in Genesis. Have we? In 1 John chapter 3, the apostle writes, I'm going to start in verse 7. Little children, make sure no one deceives you. The one who practices righteousness is righteous, just as he is righteous. The one who practices sin is of the devil. For the devil has sinned from the beginning. The Son of God appeared for this purpose, to destroy the works of the devil. No one who is born of God practices sin, because his seed abides in him, and he cannot sin because he is born of God. By this, the children of God and the children of the devil are obvious. Anyone who does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor the one who does not love his brother. And you want to know if somebody is a child of God or a child of Satan? It ain't hard. This is the criteria right here. You either love your brother or you don't. This is the message which we've heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. Not as Cain, who was of the evil one and slew his brother. And for what reason did he slay him? Because his deeds were evil and his brothers were righteous. Do not be surprised, brethren, if the world hates you. We know that we have passed out of death into life because we love the brethren. He who does not love abides in death. Everyone who hates his brother is a murderer. And you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him. Maybe you didn't go out and stab your brother in the face. But John says if you hate your brother, you are one and the same as a murderer. It's the same teaching that Jesus gave in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, where he talks about how, you've heard it said, you shall not murder. But I say to you, whoever says to your brother, good for nothing, or he shall be guilty before the court. Whoever says to his brother, you fool, shall be guilty enough to go into fiery hell. Settle your conflicts with your brethren. It's inevitable that conflicts arise. That's not the problem. The problem is succumbing to sin once it is crouched at the door, as Cain did, as Esau was going to do, and as Joseph's brothers tried to do. The question is whether we are a brother killer or a brother lover. And there's the only two things you can possibly be. It's a mutually exclusive choice. We talk about loving one another. It's not an easy thing to do, to love one another. It is an easy thing to talk about, but it's a hard thing to do. Jesus identified this as the distinguishing mark of discipleship. This is my commandment. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you. By this all men will know you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. John 13, verses 34 and 35. And if we believe in a God who created a world in 6 days, we believe in a God who can do anything at all, we surely must believe that God is capable of giving Christians a sign by which they can recognize each other. I fear that the world does not recognize us by this distinguishing mark. Instead, what happens is brethren invent their own marks of discipleship and apply that instead. How do people know you're Christians? It's not by the name on the sign, and it's not by the fact that you say you're not a denomination, and it's not by when you take this Lord's Supper, or whether or not you use instruments, or whether or not you hold the correct view on MDR. It ultimately comes down to this. Jesus said, I'm not saying that those things don't matter. I'm saying it comes down to what Jesus said, that if you do not love your brethren, how will the world know you are his disciples? The world does not know you are his disciples. Isn't that proof in the pudding right there that maybe you don't love your brethren the way Jesus said you would? And if we profess to respect the Word of God, we ought to respect that Jesus knew exactly what he was talking about. If you want the world to know who you are, you've got to have the love for one another that Jesus said here. Cain was obviously a child of the devil. He was characterized by hate. And we know that he hated his brother. Why? Because he proved it by his actions. He didn't never come out and say, I hate my brother. It's not recorded for us. He just went and killed his brother. The proof is in the pudding right there. He's one of the few Bible characters to kill his brother. Esau tries to kill Jacob. Joseph's brothers tried to kill him. And time will fail me if I speak of Abimelech and Absalom and Jehoram, all who did the same thing. It is the mark of a child of Satan. And yet how many of us Christians are guilty of doing just that? Of killing our brethren spiritually. And maybe we didn't put a gun to his head and shoot him. We did everything we could to demonstrate our contempt and dislike of him. Take every opportunity to talk trash behind his back. Take every opportunity to ignore his needs and push him away. Take every opportunity to commit spiritual murder. Or even spiritual abortion. Prevent somebody from becoming a Christian at all in the first place. It's just one and the same. The world is characterized by hate. The world is characterized by people like Cain and Esau. But we are not to be of the world. We are not to be consumed by all that is in the world. The lusts of the eyes, the lusts of the flesh, the boastful pride of life. These are the things that John says contributes to this type of mentality. And the bottom line is that the world's hatred, the world's attitude towards everything is not an excuse for any lack of love that we ourselves might have. Because if we do not love, we abide in death, John says. We are like the world. We are dead. When James talks about friendship with the world being hostility towards God in James chapter 4, what is he talking about in the context? The source of quarrels and conflicts among you. Your own pleasures that wage war in your members. You're all interested in getting what is yours, what belongs to you, James says. Adopted this worldly idea of selfish philosophy that you only go around once in life, and so you might as well grab all the gusto you can get, because you got to get what you deserve. No. It's not the message of the gospel. That's not the message of Jesus Christ. Is that how Jesus lived? Mark read that rather graphic description of what happened to Jesus. Do you think Jesus was doing all that because he was trying to get what he deserved? He was trying to grab all the gusto he could get? Do you think he did that because for his own convenience? No. He did that because he loved us. Because he laid down his life for us. Now, I should end this with a more positive note. Go back to Genesis. There is a happy ending to the story. Now, it was Judah's idea to sell Joseph into slavery and to kill him in this fashion. But Joseph doesn't die, does he? He goes down to Egypt. He winds up in the house of Potiphar. He winds up in another pit. The word in the Hebrew is the same. It's the dungeon, the pit that he winds up in, for a crime he did not commit. Good as dead. But eventually he interprets the dreams of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh lifts him up from the pit and exalts him to his right hand. There's a whole parallel with Jesus there, which is another sermon in and of itself that I'm not even going to do today. But Joseph interprets these dreams for Pharaoh that there's going to be 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. And when the 7 years of famine hit, only the nation of Egypt is prepared, because only the nation of Egypt knew in advance, because Joseph told them when God gave him the interpretation of the dreams. And the famine is hard on everybody, including Jacob and his sons, Joseph's brothers, who killed him. And so by great twist of irony, by great twist of coincidence, Joseph's brothers wind up in Egypt asking for grain, for food, from the one that they originally sold into slavery to go there. Now if that isn't the most epic coincidence ever, I don't know what is. But it's not a coincidence at all, is it? Because Joseph says this is what God designed to happen. Intended for happen. You meant to destroy me. You meant this for evil, but God turned it into good. And Joseph sees them coming. He recognizes them. And I don't know exactly what his motivation for all the things he does is, but he conceals his identity from them. And he notices that his youngest brother Benjamin is missing. And Benjamin has taken his place as his daddy's favorite now. But he imprisons Simeon and he sends the rest of them back to Jacob. And Jacob sees Simeon missing, and the brothers come back and they're going, he won't give us any more food unless we bring Benjamin with us next time. And they have to twist Jacob's arm into getting him to agree to this. Reuben offers his own 2 sons as an insurance policy, which isn't very convincing or assuring. Judah offers his own life as surety. They come back to Egypt with Benjamin, and then Joseph arranges the final test. He gives them their food, but he plants his silver cup in the bag of the youngest, Benjamin. And as they are on their way home, Joseph has them searched. They find the silver cup, and Joseph threatens Benjamin with a life of imprisonment in Egypt. And now the choice is made once again. The brothers face the same choice they did before. Do they abandon their brother to slavery and death? Or do they save him and deliver him? And it is in that context that Judah gives the following speech in verse 18 of chapter 44. Judah approached him and said, "O my lord, may your servant please speak a word in my lord's ears, and do not be angry with your servant, for you are equal to Pharaoh. My lord asks his servant, saying, Have you a father or a brother? We said to my lord, We have an old father and a little child of his old age, and now his brother is dead, so he alone is left of his mother, and his father loves him. But you have said to your servants, Bring him down to me, that I may set my eyes on him. We said to my lord, the lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. You said to your servants, however, Unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you will not see my face again. And thus it came about, when we went up to your servant my father, we told him the words of my lord, and our father said, Go back and buy us a little food. But we said, We cannot go down. If our youngest brother is with us, then we will go down, for we cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Your servant my father said to us, You know that my wife bore me 2 sons, and one went out from me, and I said, Surely he is torn in pieces. Joseph's ironically being told he's dead here. I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me and harm befalls him, you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow. Now therefore, when I come to your servant my father, and the lad is not with us, since his life is bound up in the lad's life, when he sees that the lad is not with us, he will die. Thus your servant will bring the gray hair Thus your servants will bring the gray hair of your servant our father down to Sheol in sorrow. For your servant became surety for the lad to my father, saying, If I do not bring him back to you, let me bear the blame before my father forever. Now therefore, please, let your servant, in other words, let me, remain instead of the lad, a slave to my lord. Let the lad go up with his brothers. For how shall I go up to my father, if the lad is not with me, for fear that I would see the evil that would overtake my father? Now this is Judah talking. This is Judah, the same Judah that wanted to sell Joseph into slavery. He keeps his word. He lays down his life for his brother. Exactly what it was that changed Judah over the last 20-something odd years, I don't know for sure. I imagine the incidents in Genesis 38 had something to do with it. But Judah, who once sought to destroy Joseph, now seeks to save Benjamin. And in all of Genesis, with all of its brother killers, Judah is the only character in the whole book who lays down his life for his brother, foreshadowing the work of Christ himself. The passage we were reading in 1 John 3, I stopped just short of verse 16, which says, We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. In John 15, in verses 12 through 13, it says, This is my commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than one lay down his life for his friends. There's a powerful lesson in that. Somebody can go from being the brother killer to being the one who lays down his life. The question you have to ask yourself is, which are you? Are you a brother killer or a brother lover? Are you a child of God or a child of Satan? Are you like Cain or are you like Abel? Are you like the Judah of Genesis 37 or are you like the Judah of Genesis 44? If you previously walked with hatred and malice and jealousy in your heart towards your brethren, we learn the all-important lesson that there's no more appropriate time than now to change your allegiance, to change your heart, and to change your destiny. Christ laid down his life for us all. So I ask you all and compel you all to make a decision to lay down your lives for one another. Not just by dying for each other, but by living for each other each day, in and out. If there's anything we can do to help you in your relationship with the Lord, now would be an appropriate time to make it known. Well, together we stand and we sing.